I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2010 and then diagnosed Crohn's disease, then ulcerative colitis with gastritis, and then Crohn's disease. And UCLA, Cedars-Sinai, Mayo Clinic, they couldn't make up their mind. All I know is I had chronic inflammation throughout the entire bowel until it became life-threatening. Autoimmune disease didn't exist. We can't handle the environment. You ever seen that Tom Cruise movie where the aliens take over the world and die at the very end because the organisms get them? It's like that. Like, we're losing our ability to handle our own environment. A big thing for me is how food is prepared, not just what you're eating. You can get a perfect, organic, whatever, and if you cook it improperly, you're causing worse digestion, more inflammation. You're not going to get bioavailable nutrients. You're going to destroy the nutrients if cooked improperly.
All right, welcome. Good morning. I'm really excited. We've got Dane Johnson with us today. I think we're going to talk a little bit about IBD, or inflammatory bowel disease. And Dane, so you're out there in sunny California. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into this stuff?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shawn, and thanks for just taking the time. And anyone out there who's dealing with any chronic sickness, I want this time to be about you. I'm going to do everything in my power to give you groundbreaking information that's going to be aha and life-changing. So God bless. Thanks for having me. I got into this not willingly, Shawn. I'll tell you that. Not willingly. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2010 and then diagnosed Crohn's disease, then ulcerative colitis with gastritis, and then Crohn's disease. And UCLA, Cedars-Sinai, Mayo Clinic, they couldn't make up their mind. All I know is I had chronic inflammation throughout the entire bowel until it became life-threatening. I never wanted to do natural medicine. Never wanted to do diets. I was a good old boy from Virginia, went to school, College of Charleston, and just ate whatever I wanted like everybody else, grew up with processed foods until it started destroying my life and took a lot of my 20s. And going against the grain, so to speak, with what all the conventional doctors were saying was really just a choice of being backed into a corner, fighting for my life, 122 pounds, in a wheelchair, feeding tube, TPN feeding tube, been on Entyvio, Remicade, prednisone, methotrexate, 6-MP. I was taking prednisone like Skittles for 4 or 5 years. And you name it, man, I was on it, and I just had to find a way out, and I did.
Thankfully, and you look great, by the way. I can imagine being 120 some pounds stuck in a wheelchair, and because that's what happens to a lot of people with IBD. And in many cases, weight just pulls off them. They get really sick, and it's literally awful. I see a lot of those folks. Obviously, all those medications, and if we look at the standard medical model, doc-wise is happening. We don't know. Maybe it's genetic. Who knows? That's a typical response you get. And therefore, when they treat it, so what do? You take these medicines for the rest of your life, and that's the end of the story typically. And for many people, that's what it is. That is the story. But fortunately, as you've discovered, and I certainly have seen, that doesn't necessarily hold up. And there's a lot better things you can do potentially. But you were down, so you'd suffered this for many years, medications, they're not without side effects. How was your quality of life while you were medicated? Did it help in any way, or was it just what was going on?
No, it did. And I think it does for a lot of us. It does calm those symptoms, put a bit to sleep, especially the first time I took prednisone and mesalazine. That was the first concoction, was Lialda and 60 milligrams of prednisone tapering off. And the blood went down. I would have a bowel movement. It looked like a crime scene. So all of a sudden, blood's going down, mucus is going down. I'm going from 15, 17 bowel movements a day down to 7, 6. Life's a little bit more manageable. And for a young kid, it's like, all right, that's my ticket. Let's go back to life. So I'm back in the gym, taking pre-workout, crappy whey protein from GNC, General Narcotics Center. And I'm just going at it. And then I start getting sick again. Okay, let's go on stronger drugs and sick again. And anyone out there who's dealing with that, one of the things I did realize years later, I went through a phase where I was very angry with the doctors because they weren't talking to me about different root issues I later came to find that we can talk about today. But we can really shake hands with them because what we do with functional medicine, if you're going carnivore, if you're using certain supplementations, you're working on digestion, microbiome, it is symbiotic with medications. Meaning you can take prednisone and Entyvio and you can still work on your nutrition plan. You can still do functional labs. You can still treat your microbiome. You can still work on other forms of what's causing that cytokine reaction, such as TNF-alpha, IL-6, IL-1 beta, that you really can do both at once. I think a lot of us feel like I have to be conventional. I have to be natural. I got to pick a flag. Nah, there's a great gray area that I think doctors are coming to find now. That's why they're starting to talk about probiotics and diets.
Yeah, there's certainly, like I said, there certainly is room to manage it both. Obviously, ideally, you can get off the medications because obviously there's side effects, there's costs associated with that. There's a dependence upon someone else, which I find this is something that I find a lot of people feel disempowered with the system because they're literally dependent on someone else's, and so it's very frustrating in that regard. But so this obviously was going on many, many years ago. for you. Fortunately, you got through that. How did you, was it just at some point, I'm just sick of it, I'm going to try something else? Or what caused you to reach outside the conventional, go to the doctor, take your disease modulating biologics?
Yeah. For me, and this is what's different and why I'm so passionate about this, Shawn, it wasn't just as easy as changing my diet or taking a few supplements or seeing an ND and doing a quantitative PCR stool analysis. I failed for years. So it was 4 or 5 years of, this isn't working. I'm going to take a stronger drug. It's not working. It's not working. To the doctors saying, okay, we want to remove your full colon. We're going to give you a bag. You're going to go on disability. You're going to leave your life in California, go move back in with mom in Virginia and live on disability for a little while. That's going to be your life. So for me, there was no other option. I was willing to do whatever the doctor said. I flew around to the biggest, baddest doctors and GIs that my insurance could cover, that my parents could afford, and we didn't get anywhere. And then even when I did start working with an ND and I got into natural medicine school and started working with different professors, as my body was still very resistant. I had a plethora of root issues, not one root cause, root causes. And so I had to, it was either, hey, this is going to be your life over here, what the bleakness the doctors were giving me, or you're going to crawl your ass out of this and you're going to work every single day. And I was housebound for a year, 6'2", 122 pounds. Now I'm 190 pounds. I haven't taken a drug in 10 years. And it wasn't easy. It took me a long time to get off the prednisone. I had to go on a chemotherapy to save my life because that's another story. We found cytomegalovirus in my blood. It was a doctor in Florida who helped my mom find it. And then I had massive candida, parasites. I had severe amounts of H. pylori, and none of the doctors found this, man. Like, I'm a 22, 23-year-old kid going to every major hospital. They're going, yeah, you have chronic inflammatory bowel disease, as you already mentioned. What does that mean? What causes it? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. But here's some biologics. Here's some prednisone steroids to calm it down. And so when I started finding different issues that was wrong with my system, that's when the light bulb went off and I started getting confident that I was going to be the CEO of my health.
Yeah, that's a good analogy because I always warn people, don't outsource your health to someone else. You're the one that has most skin in the game with this, and you got to live with it 24/7. And that's a really good point because there's such a lack of curiosity about why. You go to the doctor, why is this occurring? We don't know, right? We don't have time to think about that, quite honestly, is really the answer there. So as far as obviously what you're doing now with diet and nutrition and supplementation, probably none of that was discussed by the GI docs when you were maybe, or how much did they actually give credence to? Because I hear GI doctors say that IBD has nothing to do with diet, which I just literally am I'm incredulous about that. So it's crazy. So how much did the typical GI or all the many GIs, did they talk about any of these things, supplements, anything like that?
Well, back in 2000, really chronically sick from 2011 to 2014, and then 2015 is where I really started going off. And back then, 10, 15 years ago, it was talked about even less. Now in our community, I'm hearing certain doctors in New York, certain doctors in LA, and some of the bigger hospitals start saying, hey, maybe you should do a low residue diet, or maybe you should cut out the sugars or the alcohol. So there's a bit more conversation. Some people are even getting RDs in the hospital who will work with someone around nutrition, but they don't really have a lot of experience with it. And they're looking for the research around it. So I don't think it's come as far as we want, but I believe the answer is to work symbiotically with the doctors, especially if you've been severe. The medications can help calm things down while you build out your gut and do things. So I think that's really what got me so excited about doing what I do. Is it was just talked about so little. And when I got into functional medicine, I found so many options that helped me get out of that anxiety and depression and hopelessness and start saying, hey, I could put one foot in front of the other here. There's something I can really do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just coincidentally, there's a case series of 10 IBD patients that we're going to get published here in the next probably month with obviously using a carnivore diet in this particular case, which has been very helpful for many people. And it's objective. There's biopsy pros and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and they show complete remission. And we've struggled to get that published because peer review, IRBs are just like, they don't want to touch this stuff because they're like, oh, this isn't the standard pharmacy-directed treatment option. So we've been fighting to get this thing published. And it's good data. I mean, it's good science, and it should be out there, but you're swimming upstream against this stuff. What did you do? So I'm a proponent of a carnivore diet, but I will certainly concede there are many things that are important here. So let's talk about what you did to get better.
I am a fan. I'm a fan of the carnivore diet. And just to speak on that a bit, I've seen Personally, I've seen over 1,000 people and worked with over 1,000 people with Crohn's colitis for months at a time. My team, we see 120 IBD clients a week around the world. You know, if I had to generically, we're all different. My whole thing is I build customized plans. I work with vegans, vegetarians, meat eaters, whichever you are. In some cultures, that's how it is, right? Plant-based. But when I look generically at the carnivore or predominantly meat eating, it does tend to generically give more results. And that can have to do with, you get a lot of calories, cutting out the sugars, cutting out certain fibers that are very dense and hard on an inflamed colon or gut, getting the right kind of calories and protein, which you need to build the body. Sometimes with carnivore, I do see problems with fat malabsorption. The high iron intake can be aggravating for certain people. And then there's a lot of hidden problems where people are still not looking at the seed oils. They're going to get steaks at certain restaurants. They're not cooked properly, or not getting quality meat, and that can be a problem as well. Histamine issues for some as well. But for me, the first thing I did that actually started to get me results is I did go about more paleo. I had a bit of plant-based, but it was about 80% meat. And what that did is it helped to calm down the bacteria overgrowth and the candida. I had mass amounts of candida, mass amounts of dysbiosis, SIBO going on. And just getting rid of those sugars, getting rid of those dense carbs, that did calm down the bowel movements. It did help to clear up my skin. It did help to calm down the inflammation. I did that along with probiotics, taking curcumin, other anti-inflammatories, a bit of fish oil, a lot of sun, a lot of meditation. Resetting the nervous system was really big. So for me, I think a lot of us aren't utilizing. One big takeaway I want everyone to have right now is you've got to look at a compound effect. Don't just look for a one-trick pony. Stack things. You can be carnivore, plus you can reset the nervous system, plus you can get that vitamin D up, plus you can work on the microbiome diversity, plus you can clean out that liver, right? Plus you can continue to work on that gut lining, helping to connect that epithelial cell lining to be strong, rebuild the mucosal membrane, try to calm down those cytokine reactions. Mesenchymal stem cells are great. HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is great. Peptides, BPC, KPV, lorazepatide, thymosin alpha-1. These are all fantastic. You can stack to get massive results. And that's what it took me a decade to really learn how to stack those things that really get results.
How much do you attribute the role of stress? Obviously, there's good stress and eustress or negative stressors. How much does stress play a role in your and others' IBD flare-ups and symptoms, you think?
It's a lot larger than we give credence to. And we're not really sure why. And stress is really an energy, right? And that's where people have to understand how the body works, that there is an energy that transforms into a physical result. When you get stressed, that's changing the chemistry in your body, the signals to your cells, the hormones in your body. It is affecting your digestion. It's affecting how your microbiome works. It is affecting whether you're getting dopamine, oxytocin, you're getting adrenaline pumping through your body. It's affecting if you have bowel movements, if you have 10 bowel movements a day or 6 bowel movements a day. So there is a massive correlation. So we have to practice engaging the parasympathetic. That stress is constantly engaging the sympathetic, is a good way, the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. If we can practice, and that was big in my healing. So I did prayer and purpose morning and night. I meditated every day. My ND professor was like, you got to do it. You got to get the parasympathetic engaged, which I did notice bowel movements decrease and digestion better. And you just little things, your mind's more clear. You're more willing to chew your food and calm down. You start doing belly breathing. You can handle what's wrong. You can handle seeing blood in the stool better. You can handle that, hey, I'm only 140 pounds, which was really hard for me, especially my ego, because as a young man, I wanted to lift weights and eat 1,000 calories per meal. That's just how I was raised and how we did it. So I had to let go of all that and be okay being 50 pounds underweight and saying, this is where I am. I can still be happy. Life is good. The sun is shining. My mom's here. My sisters are here. My friends are here. I still got everybody. So it helped me to reset my mindset on what I focused on. When you're chronically stressed, you're going to focus on all the negative things.
What do you consider yourself with regard to the disease? Are you cured of the disease? Is it in remission? What are your thoughts around that? And people in general when they do that?
Such a good question. Cure. First off, when we get labeled, for me, it's a deep answer, and hopefully everyone can be a little patient as I give it, because for me, it's not an easy answer. And I know a lot of people don't like that. They want it A or B. But at first, if someone stamps me on the forehead with a diagnosis, do I accept that as an identity? And that's something we have to realize. Am I going to walk around and say, I have Crohn's, I am Crohn's? People with their Instagram handle saying, my Crohn's journey, Crohn's killed me. We start identifying with these names. Crohn's and colitis didn't even exist before 1950. So what is this thing? And are we going to allow ourselves to be identified? The second thing is, can you cure anything in life? So Shawn, if I was to ask you, can you cure the flu? What would your answer be?
Depends on when people have it and then they don't have it.
Yep.
The flu will always be around, right? The bacteria, or virus, it's going to circulate in perpetuity.
Yeah. So if you get rid of it and it comes back a year later, did you cure it or was it in remission? Same thing with a bad day. What about a migraine? What about an acne? Let me ask you this. If you stop brushing your teeth, will gingivitis flare up and come out of remission? You stop. All health is balance and work. You stop working out, your beer belly is going to come out of remission. You stop doing the mindset work, your negative, pessimistic ideals are going to come out of remission. They're going to flare up. So what can you cure? That's the biggest question. I would really sit down and say, what can you cure? What can you cure? When my body gets stressed out or injured in any way, I know my gut can be reactive. I'm prone to a gut health response. Now, to go more scientifically, when you start eliminating Crohn's or colitis, what you're doing is cleaning out your body to reduce the chance of a cytokine reaction, autoimmune reaction. But what we don't know how to do yet is stop the system from being autoimmune. I have the tendency to have an autoimmune reaction if something happens. But I keep my gut clean, I keep my food clean, I've treated parasites and biofilms, and I've done liver cleanses, and I've done all these things to clean my body out, which reduces all disease. And I'm so happy for and thankful for I become more empowered. But at any moment, I can get that TNF-alpha response. I can get that cytokine response. I'm very reactive to viruses personally. I get viruses, my body doesn't like it. That being said, I think to answer that question, can anyone with an autoimmune disease stop the autoimmune process when something happens? Shawn, you might get a certain virus and your gut doesn't care. My gut goes wild. I might get COVID. I'm in the hospital. You're asymptomatic. We're already seeing that with the COVID in 2019, that kind of response that for one person asymptomatic, for another not. So how do we stop that immune system from being responsive? The closest answer I've gotten that's gotten me really feeling close to this idea of curing Crohn's and colitis is mesenchymal stem cells. That is such an amazing therapy. And if you don't know what that is, stem cells have the ability to regulate the immune system, and they're long lasting. They create their own exosomes. So when you get umbilical cord lining, HLA-DR negative gene mesenchymal stem cells, they can help long-term regulate that autoimmune response. And in doing so, theoretically, you can start to do what a biologic does, but you do it naturally and without any side effects, without any those infusions every 8 weeks, and without any risks. So stem cells, like the clinic I work with, 12 years have been doing it, not one person hospitalized, not one major issue. I got referred there from Dr. Dan Pompa and Dr. Josh Axe, who are two mentors and friends of mine. And that's where they've gone. That's where I went. And I think that it can be one of the best things to really regulate that. And they have a doctor at that clinic, Dr. Eduardo, who's had Crohn's 10 years. He's been symptom-free 6 years. His last colonoscopy showed he doesn't even need to get colonoscopies anymore for 5 or 6 years at a time with Crohn's. And the only thing he's really doing is stem cells once a year, at least 100 million stem cells. The first dose, you want to get at least 200 or more for the clinical results. But so there are some therapies like that. Peptides to do every single day. What is causing that hyperautoimmune? I would say I've calmed that down, Shawn, to answer. Is it still possible for me to get a autoimmune response? Yes. In the last 10 years, have I had major autoimmune responses? No. Have I had speed bumps? Yeah. Oh, I got a little diarrhea. I got a little cramping or gas. Shawn, you get cramping or gas, you're going, oh, it must have been something I ate, whatever. Me, or anyone like me is going, oh my God, I'm flaring. I got this IBD. So we have to retrain our mind to we're safe, we're okay. Any minimal symptom is not this big bad ghost following us around. We've got to rework our mind that we're okay, that this is not a major issue anymore. And that's why I call my program S.H.I.E.L.D. You have to build your shield to be able to protect yourself at all times and be able to watch your six, know your labs. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think we are on the road and we are much closer to this idea of curing it than we've ever been.
Watched you interview somebody the other day. I was checking through some of your social media. One concept which I share is that even though you've been labeled or diagnosed with some malady, whether it's Crohn's disease or mental health disorder, whatever, a lot of times that can be a silver lining, because if it forces you to look at your life in a very critical way and make those changes, it can actually be a good thing. And if you maybe you can espouse a little bit on that, because I think it's important that you become empowered, and it can actually, there's a silver lining, so to speak.
Shawn, you hit the nail on the head, man. You just set me up right there. I'm going to hit it out the park. We are diagnosed with purpose. Crohn's colitis is the best thing that ever happened to me. Crohn's colitis is the best thing that ever happened to me because at a young age, I started realizing how to not poison myself, the problem with processed foods, how to eat right, how to not be influenced by others by hurting myself. Oh, this is cool. This is hip. This is how everyone else is. I don't need beer. I don't need alcohol. I don't need processed foods. I don't need gluten. I don't need unprocessed dairy. I like clean food. I feel like I eat like a king. I don't get influenced by anybody who's not happier or healthier than me. I don't care how rich, how famous, how cool you are, how many chains you got on your neck. If you are not happier and you are not healthier than me, I don't care. Those are the two drivers for me. So Crohn's colitis taught me that. It is through suffering that we realize our greatest strength. It is through suffering. We need to suffer to become our best selves. And I suffered very deeply at a young age that gave me this superpower. And now I'm able to work for myself. I'm able to do something really big and good in the world because of this suffering. The worst thing that ever happened to me is now the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission because of that pain. So thank God.
Yeah, it's almost as if the worst thing that can happen to someone is to not be challenged. Because if you just go through life in kind of this miasma of mediocrity and you never really have a challenge, you don't rise up to that. And this is something that not everybody does. There's people that are beaten down by this. Certainly they're beaten down by their diagnosis. And like you said, they wear it, they adopt it, and they take on the sick role, which is often sad to see. Let me talk about, there's a difference between going from sick and what you have to do to maintaining health. And so can maybe you talk about what was necessary for you to cure this, and where do you live at today?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is I had to rewire my sense of normal. And that's what I want everyone to do, is keep coming back and having questions. Get a life coach, work with an EFT coach, sit down and talk about what is normal. Why is eating like this? Why is living like this? Why is it every time we have New Year's, Halloween's, birthdays, prom, we're poisoning ourselves, we're drinking ourselves silly, we're eating crappy food, and those are our best memories. So the first thing I had to do is I had to rewire my own sense of normal and stop being influenced by this poisonous idea of normal. So I try to, today, I influence people. People rarely influence me because I try to be happier and healthier. So I surround myself. That's one of the reasons I live in Southern California. There's organic food everywhere. There's sunshine everywhere. Where you find the mountains meet the sea, you'll find me. And so I'm living a life with how can I find balance, happiness, excitement without having to live in a way that hurt me. So the second thing is I stay on the offense. I'm curious. I'm excited. It's the same thing if you want to get in great shape. Shawn, you look like you're in amazing shape. So how do you keep it going in the gym? You've got to stay on the offense. These are my new goals. This is what I'm learning. This is what I'm curious about. If you don't keep having that, you just keep playing defense. This is what keeps me okay. This is what keeps me okay. You're going to run out of steam. So I'm constantly innovating. Like after this, I'm going to go to do some HBOT with this local doctor, and then I'm doing red light therapy. We're going to be talking about biofrequencies and Rife machines. I'm constantly learning. Then I'm heading out to Cell Course Conference, Dave Asprey's conference. I'm constantly learning. I love it. So make it a hobby, make it a passion, make health and feeling good a part of your life, and bring your significant other in on that. Bring your friends in on that. Especially guys, we can't even ask each other to hang out unless we ask each other to grab a beer, which is fine. But why can't we just hang out and talk about taking care? Hey, let's go run. Yeah, let's go run a few miles. Let's go sit down, have a steak, and talk about how to make each other's lives better. So stay on the offense is the second thing. And thirdly is surround yourself with people who want to be better. It's the same thing in wealth. It's the same thing in marriage. It's the same thing in everything that actually matters. You want to be around people who are pushing the envelope. So and I think a lot of billionaires are moving towards this because they realize that this is the seed of it all. If you can realize how to build disciplines and values that make you better, they make everyone else around you better. And you're just a better person to be around. So you're just a higher net worth networker. So for me, it's everything in my life is better. And that's what popped. When I realized that becoming the very best version of myself, that person that can do whatever. Who's Dane Johnson 3.0? Talk about myself in third person. Who is that person? That person and healing myself of Crohn's colitis were almost the exact same thing. It's 98% the same formula. So if you can write that, I'd say write that down if you want to take a big takeaway. Who the best version of yourself in healing chronic disease are almost the exact same journey.
I would imagine whatever you have to do to heal chronic disease, whether it's Crohn's disease or something else, it has a lot of carryover for most things. Probably most diseases probably would respond well to whatever you end up doing there. What are some of the big, I guess, non-negotiables for you? Obviously, you mentioned I'm not eating garbage. I would assume there's things that are, there's some things that have 1% and some things are 80. What are the big ones that you think are really important that most people could do? And I guess.
Okay, so I'll tell you, wherever I go, I always carry these types of 5 supplements. So one of the things when you get trained on this, you want to start understanding what does what. One of the biggest issues I had is when I go to an ND or some functional doctor before, they tell me to take stuff and I didn't know what it did and I took it blindly. So a non-negotiable is wherever I go in this world, because I've had hiccups and things have happened in airports and getting sick and all this, is I bring an anti-pathogen. So an anti-pathogen is something that helps kill off infections. You get food poisoning, you get COVID, or you get the flu or a virus, and that can mess you up. I want to bring an antiviral and a broad spectrum anti-pathogen. So I love like tacuna and wild over oregano with 75% or more carvacrol. Second, I'm going to bring a mucosa healer. As my gut lining could get inflamed if something ever happened, I'm going to bring something like Mucosa Calm or GI Revive or GI Enter Calm. These are concoctions that help keep the gut lining nice and calm, keep inflammation down. It's like a natural version of Lialda or Asacol for anyone who's had IBD. Thirdly is I'm going to bring a binder. I'm going to bring something that can grab toxins out. And this has been helpful for my friends and my wife. You get food poisoning, I'm going to want to kill off that with wild oregano. I'm going to use a binder to grab it and get it out. So I'm going to use something like GI Detox or bentonite clay, zeolite clay, Vired Chem by Cellcore is amazing. Next, I'm going to use an anti-inflammatory, something to keep inflammation down, like Indigo naturalis or curcumin can be great. Andographis and acetylglucosamine. Those are all wonderful. And then I'm usually going to bring some kind of meal replacement. So when I go, I'm going to have a meal replacement shake in case we're stuck in a crappy airport or something terrible happens. I'm going to put a little bit of maybe slippery elm or marshmallow root in there, protein, whole body collagen, maybe a little creatine. If I like to do fitness, so I'll have a little bit of creatine monohydrate in there. And so that I always have a meal replacement on me. So if I'm stuck in an airport, everything's canceled, I got nothing to eat, everyone's hungry, take it, get some water, pour a little bit out, pour that in, shake it up. I'm good. So I always have that kind of shield with me, my 5 categories. And second is I can get away with eating a bit of food. That's the one thing I want people to realize. And it can alarm everyone when I say it, but I fixed my gut to a point that I can eat a broad amount of food and I'll be okay. So when I was chronically sick, I couldn't have a sip of water without running to the bathroom, right? I wouldn't drink water if I left the house. Now I could eat all sorts of stuff because my digestion's optimized, my microbiome is optimized, my gut lining is calm. I have things also to help if I run into crappy food. So I call it, I don't cheat, I celebrate. So if I ever celebrate with something, which I rarely do, that'll be okay. So I can handle a broad amount of food because that was a non-negotiable for me for years. I had to eat super, super strict. Then I found times where it was almost impossible. So one of my goals became, okay, I want to eat this way, but if I ever can't eat this way, I want to know I'm safe. And that also helped with the safety that I'm cured, quote unquote, right? It's because for me, if I couldn't handle more of a broad amount of food variety, it made me still feel like a sick person. So even if I don't agree that's the healthiest food, I want my body to be able to handle it. That stress. I got freedom there where food, I eat very clean, very specific. Most of my food is homemade. I've got 2 kids, a house. We got a full circus going on here. So we just try to keep it at home the most. Non-negotiable is to stay on the offense. That's another one. Stay on the offense, keep learning, keep doing, keep trying. I was talking with one of our members, Jay. He's the chief of the fire department in Tampa, Florida. And he's had ulcerative colitis for 20 years, something like that. And he's been 0 issues for 3 years with a perfect colonoscopy. And I was doing his case study where we sit down for an hour and a half and talk about the 2 years and what he did. And that was one of his big things we were talking about is he continues to learn and innovate and try new things and continues to look at his labs and say, what's going on? So I'd say that's the next one. The last one that's coming to mind right now is I'm consistently doing lab work 2-3 times a year. I love looking at lab work. I think, if you're really into this, there's so much you can do for your body, whether it's fitness goals, whether it's longevity, biohacking, especially if you have any autoimmune disease, you want to keep looking for deeper issues. So for example, I did a GI 360. Now I'm doing biofilm busters with biobotanical research, doing some H-bot, and then I'm going to be doing another GI 360, another mycotoxin test. So as I release the biofilms in the body, rechecking to see if anything gets kicked up out of the dust.
Let me just delve into some of the labs specific to inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's or UC. Fecal calprotectin is one that's often used as a general marker of gut inflammation. There's some of the more standard inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, IL-6, so on and so forth. What are the things that you find that are specifically useful for labs so people can evaluate where they are in Crohn's? Is it severe? Is it pretty much in remission? How do you determine that?
Yeah, so fecal calprotectin is a big one. I love to get that checked often. It's non-invasive stool analysis. It's so volatile, you can get it checked once a week and see results, especially if people are coming off biologics. I'll check it every 7 days, and I'll also try to get cytokines. So cytokines are another thing. They're a little harder to get. A company called Diagnostic Solution Labs has a test called the CytoDX. That's will check your cytokines. But if you've got a doctor who's a little open-minded, he'll usually order under insurance, save you $300. But you want to be checking specifically TNF alpha, IL-6, IL-beta-1 or 1-beta, IL-12, IL-23. Those are great. IL-18 is also good. It can be a more localized reaction in the gut lining. So checking the cytokines is where you're seeing more autoimmune response. Calprotectin is huge. Then also checking your SED rate, your CRP. For anyone who's had mold as an underlying problem, you also want to do a chronic inflammatory response syndrome, a SEERS test. So checking your VEGF, your C4A, a book called Toxic by Neil Nathan, he'll dive into that. So if you're dealing with mold, the first 3 or 4 chapters are amazing to understand how you can look for deeper levels of inflammation with mold, which we do believe might be one of the root issues of why we're autoimmune. We were talking about cure and the autoimmune problem. Mold might be a deeper issue there. Heavy metals, environmental toxins could be deeper issues there. Parasites, for why is the immune system responding? So we think that the immune system is being poisoned in some way to be hyperactive. So that's really good. You're also going to want to check. Doctors don't like checking it as much, but a lot of times insurance will cover it. It's good to look at is your ASCA and your PANCA, your ASCA anti-Saccharomyces cerevisiae antibodies. So 75% of people with Crohn's disease have antibodies to Baker's yeast, essentially, which is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So that's a blood analysis that can tell you something. PANCA can tell you a bit about it too. The SEERS test, CytoD, and the calprotectin. So those are great for inflammatory response. If you don't want to do an endoscopy and colonoscopy, the next thing I'll have people do is a CT scan. And you have to drink that liquid that's terrible for you and it's terrible for your gut, but you got to pick your poison when it comes to doing deeper checks. That can be really good for checking if there's inflammation or damage around the ileum. It can also see ulcers. It can just start to see thickening of the wall lining. So I've had a few people specifically with Crohn's, gastritis, ileum issues, just do CT scans to check on how things are going. And we've been able to say, hey, all your ulcers are gone. We're not seeing signs of inflammation. Calprotectin's normal. But a doctor's not going to give you, if you need a doctor to tell you that, where you got a piece of paper from the doctor, you're going to have to do an endoscopy and or colonoscopy. And if you're going that route, the first thing I'm going to do is a sigmoidoscopy, so I don't have to be put under. So that's going to reduce my risk by not having to go on that and actually having to go under. So a sigmoidoscopy can be great. That's what I did last, is a sigmoid. So I'm in there, I stay awake, and I'll use magnesium citrate to help and fast. I'll do like a bone broth fast. And do mag citrate to clear the colon. Then they do a sigmoidoscopy, look at the colon. 90% of my problem was in the colon, so that's pretty good for me. So that's where you can really check on things. Doctors are never going to tell you you're cured or you're good. It's where are you at mentally, continuing to check long term. For me, can you see your calprotectin continuing to be normal 6 months, a year, 2 years, where 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's staying under 50? And can you see your SED rate and CRP continue to stay normal? Have you gotten a sigmoidoscopy, maybe even a CT scan? And if you can do those things, I think you're in the clear. And what you do naturally can be symbiotic with conventional.
Yeah, for those people unaware, sigmoidoscopy, you don't run up as far. You don't have to get into the ascending, descending.
Yeah, you're not under anesthesia. They're not going as far up the colon. A lot of people will want to do a full colonoscopy, but sigmoidoscopy is a lot less dangerous. Not medium. It's still dangerous in certain ways that you can perforate the bowel, but you don't have to go under anesthesia. You can be awake. It's quicker. You can see what's going on. It does feel funky, though. There's no way around that.
Yeah, I want to just go into the demographics of this disease because you mentioned 1950s. Maybe that's the first time we figured out how to diagnose this. Probably, it certainly is on the increase, as I'm sure you're aware. I think we're well into the millions of people that have
Oh yeah.
either Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. What is the demographics? And you mentioned some people, it may be a mold exposure. Some people, I suspect it may be just due to some of the dietary factors. What's the demographics of Crohn, and why do you think some people are having it? What are the different causes?
What's interesting is the complexity of a diagnosis, I think, is the first problem. If you look at the amount of people dealing with IBS, it's monstrous. Some form of IBS, it's monstrous. We're talking in America, generically speaking, from what I've seen in the research, it could be give or take 80 million, 100 million. I'm talking a large percent.
This is IBS you mentioned. Yeah, IBS is different than IBD, but yes, sir. But they share some commonalities, right? Yeah.
That goes on to the next point is what is the difference? Because there's a lot of people who are first being diagnosed with IBS and then being diagnosed IBD. So we consider it just pre-elementary. It's like being pre-diabetic, right? It's like the gun's loaded. Right? There's problems going on. And so we do see that commonly happen where then it gets diagnosed. And then you see people like me where it's ulcerative colitis, and then it's Crohn's disease. And then you're unsure. Then you have other people where, it's diverticulitis. We had 2 people come in lately, first diagnosed diverticulitis, then diagnosed microscopic colitis, and then diagnosed ulcerative colitis. So there's a complexity in what is even happening in the diagnosis and what's the difference between all these forms of IBD. I think that's where doctors are even getting themselves a bit confused. And so I think that's weighing on that. And I think maybe they're creating so many complexities just to help try to separate the epidemic of it. Shawn, because if I have, oh no, you don't have ulcerative colitis, you have pancolitis. Oh no, you have collegiate colitis. Oh no, you've got microscopic. No, that's lymphocytic colitis. They're creating these little categories to spread out the numbers, in my opinion, because it's really all the same thing. Inflammation of the colon or inflammation throughout the GI tract. But I think the number, if my memory serves me correct, in the year 2000, there was 1 million people diagnosed with a form of IBD. Then in 2014, it was 2 million. And then now I think it's north of 3. But
this is just in the U.S.
Just the U.S. And then we're considering, if you look at Europe, Australia, North America, we're considering a number around 8 million. And that's just people who were diagnosed. And we get people all the time. I don't have a diagnosis. Doctors don't know what's going on, but I'm getting blood and stool, cramping, pain, urgency, weight loss, mucus, you name it. And we're seeing it everywhere. Every day someone comes up to the streets or says, hey, I got this problem. My bowels are messed up in some way. So a lot of times we just look at the symptoms and we look at the root issues. So we look at their digestion, their microbiome, and we just take the diagnosis as, okay, we understand that or don't, but either way, we feel we can get into that engine and work it out.
Why do you think the incidence is increasing? Obviously, our genetics haven't changed significantly. I don't know if mold is on the increase versus what it might have been. I suspect part of it's our food, how crappy our food has become. What are your thoughts on the increasing incidence?
So what's interesting here, Shawn, is the biggest increase right now with IBD is in our children. So we're seeing it's like a cascade. So we know it's environmental. Because if you looked at the average age of IBD 20 years ago, it was late 30s, early 40s, and it's just getting younger and younger. We're dealing with 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds diagnosed IBD. 3, 6, 8. It's crazy. So I think it can't be genetic. If we have an epidemic, it has to be environmental. That's just the law of science and chronic disease. Right? If there's an epidemic of mass proportion where all these new people are being diagnosed, it has to be an environmental issue. Okay? And environmental can be what we breathe, what we drink, what we eat, electronics, what else has changed. So we have to then look at it. So I think it's a combination of both. But I think if I had to pick one, Shawn, on what I think's going on, I think it's the soil and I think it's the food. And obviously the glyphosate issue. Glyphosate is an antibiotic. It's destroying the natural microbiome. It's sprayed everywhere. I tested a woman who is 98% organic. This woman is so specific, and she was in the 70th high percentile of glyphosate found in her urine. And she's like, yeah, I live in Texas. It's everywhere. You're breathing it in. It's in the soil. It's in the breast milk. It's in the rainwater. So for me, and I was talking to Dr. Zach Bush about that, and he was concurring on that because When I did an interview with him, he was showing me charts of when 1989, when glyphosate was allowed to be sprayed on all our crop, and the epidemic of autoimmune disease, cancer, autism, and showing the charts on how they were symbiotically moving. I think Dr. Zach Bush is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and his opinion is the glyphosate in the soil as well. So that's where I'm seeing the most evidence. And I think that's making us more susceptible to viruses. Ask yourself this, Shawn, is Epstein-Barr virus new? Did that just come up in the world 50 years, or we were more resistant to it and didn't have to worry about it? What about in these parasites? Are these parasites new? Heck no. People have been living on farms and drinking river water and swimming in God knows what for hundreds of years. We're more clean now than ever. Why are parasites now such a phenomenon? Autoimmune disease didn't exist. We can't handle the environment. You ever seen that Tom Cruise movie where the aliens take over the world and die at the very end because the organisms get them? It's like that. Like, we're losing our ability to handle our own environment. So we're becoming more susceptible to viruses like me. When that virus hit me, it would have hit me. Now, on the other hand, our lifespan's a lot longer. So I just think that our immune system's malfunctioning to a toxic environment. Maybe there is a different variety of bacteria, pathogens, viruses. They're mutating. We know E. coli mutated to become Shiga E. coli and actually become nasty to the body, whereas in the 1980s, E. coli was actually neutral to the body. Bacteria is a single-cell living organism. It's conscious, and it can change in a moment. It can change against us at any moment. So you can have bacteria chilling in the body without a problem. Stress hits. This was an interesting one I heard from the CEO of Nature and Probiotics, Natasha Trenev. She's been doing this for 50 years. She said, based on certain stresses and environmental factors, bacteria can become neutral in your body and in your body automatically change into inflammatory in the body based on environment. So these organisms are living, they're conscious and symbiotic with us, and they can change. So we have to put a little bit up to this of, I need to relax my body. Stress, I think, is another, that's how stress gets involved too, Shawn, if I was to assume that, the next part.
Yeah, obviously some of it depends on diagnostic capability, but other regional variations in IBD, say maybe you go to Europe or South America or something where it's not as prevalent, and do you think there's something they're doing regionally that's different? Obviously there's genetic drifts in different places, but is it more so in more westernized countries that we see this?
Yes. It's more so in westernized countries. There's also some good evidence that the farther a civilization is away from an equator, the more likely they are to get an autoimmune disease. So that's where a lot of us have felt that the sun, nature has something to do with it. And it goes back to the glyphosate. EU has banned a lot of the glyphosate. They're not spraying their food. Why is gluten intolerance much lower in Italy than it is in the United States? And Italy's eating much more gluten. The gliadin issue, because it's not just gluten, it's the gliadin protein that's not being broken down because of improper fermentation of the bread, if you ever ate bread, right? And two is the glyphosate. We're spraying our crops right before we pick them. And if you look at the cycle of when glyphosate is sprayed on wheat versus when it's sprayed on corn or soy, it's actually sprayed later in the cycle for wheat, which is one indication of why we think the intolerance of wheat is so high versus corn or soy, is because it was sprayed very late, right before the crop was pulled, whereas the corn and soy was sprayed more early. So we think that's reducing the glyphosate load on the crop. So I think there's a lot of evidence around that, GMOs, glyphosate, the soil being destroyed. If you really think about the microbiome diversity in the soil, it's very similar to the earth, to the body. If the diversity is lost within the soil, it starts to die. If the diversity is lost in the human body, we start to perish as well. So there's a symbiotic nature between us and earth. And I find it interesting how humans seemingly getting more sick, and the earth is seemingly getting more sick.
Yeah, it's interesting with glyphosate, being used as a desiccant to help with crop harvest towards the end. And we see that particularly, I think, in grains and legumes, it seems to be really prevalent. And one of the thoughts is that mammals detoxified, it doesn't accumulate. However, it has a profound impact on microbiome, which was never really looked at back when it was approved back in the late 80s or something. And so now we have all the interaction. Maybe it doesn't directly cause direct harm to us as a species, but it affects our microbiome in a significant way, and that may have some downstream effects for sure. But yeah, and you can't get away from it. That's the thing. It's like the microplastics now. They're in everything, and it's what do you do in this kind of environment?
I think that what a lot of people are doing with the tetrahydrate, like Dr. Zach Bush again coming out with the Ion Biome product tetrahydrate that helps reduce the damage from gliadin and glyphosate. That's essentially what it does. I think that's and then test yourself, guys. Get a urine analysis of glyphosate. You can go talk to your local practitioner. I think you might be able to order it on lifeextension.com. That's a great place where if anyone doesn't feel like they can get labs somewhere, you can order lab kits to your house and then just find a place to draw the blood. So you get CBC, calprotectin. I think you can get a glyphosate test there. But Mosaic Labs used to be Great Plains. They do a glyphosate test. And it's like with a doctor, wholesale, it's $98. So it's very cheap. But you want to start reducing that load of glyphosate. And I definitely check to see where it is, because as the gut lining gets weaker, you look at any disease. If Shawn has anyone come on about, the autism, cognitive function issues, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, colitis, all these diseases that are prevalent now, we all go back to the microbiome. Every single one of these diseases, diabetes, cancers, microbiome. The microbiome is a big, big part of what's happening. So we have to look at what is destroying the microbiome, what is affecting the diversity of the microbiome, and how do we fix that? And interesting enough, Shawn, when I looked at we have a lot of carnivore people in our program, and a few of them big hitters in the world doing big things. And when I've looked at their stool analysis, interesting enough, I've seen quite healthy microbiome diversity. Now, looking at the microbiome and at stool tests in 2024, it's like looking at Mars. You're seeing some craters, you're seeing some colonies. You think you know what you're looking at. That's what it is now. We're looking at colonies. We're talking about trillions of bacteria. There's more bacteria in the body than human cells. It's not even close, right? So we're trying to look at colonies and understanding which colonies are effective and are symbiotic and help protect the body. But from what we see, I see a lot of people who practice fasting, carnivore, many diets, but whenever people are very specific with any kind of really clean diet and make an effort, I tend to see healthier microbiome diversity in a quantitative PCR stool analysis.
Yeah, that's been my experiences too, because one of the knocks on a carnivore diet is you're going to kill microbiome diversity, but it's not been my experience in the people that have shared that data. So I think it's unfounded, quite honestly. And we do know that the microbiome is, Tommy Wood's a researcher up here at UW, and he's done some research regarding the flexibility of the microbiome. And you say that, look, your background diet, your body your microbiome can respond to it in either negative or positive ways. It's got a lot of flexibility. I do want to touch on diet a little bit just toward the ends here. When you say you have the fortune that you can eat a fairly diverse diet, but there still are probably some ground rules.
Yes.
If you walk into the grocery store, what percentage of the grocery store is available to you? Whereas I walk through most of them, like, this is all garbage. I have no interest in it. What are your thoughts on that?
So for me, and just to make sure everyone's clear on that, I try to operate on what I want, not what I fear. And that's been part of my safety and my resurrection of my spiritual groundedness. So I'm not scared to eat food, but I almost never eat crap food. So I'd never practice it, but I know I can. That was the point there. 90% of what I get at a grocery store is on the outside of the grocery store. I rarely need to go inside those aisles. So that's the big thing, is if you can just stay mostly on the outside, you're probably already better than most. If I have to open a package, that's another thing. If I have to actually I call that a convenience tax. If you open a package, there's usually a convenience tax on it, because it's fast, it's quick, you open it, it's ready to go, you can eat it right there, you can microwave it right there. Whereas you're not taking the time to actually cook it, to prepare it yourself. Whenever you just open a wrapper, realize there's a convenience tax on it. I try to stay and actually get fruits or vegetables or meats and get it clean. Like for me, I don't even get a lot of my meats from the grocery store anymore. I actually get from specific farms. So I order from farm to my house. So another thing that I've done over time, Shawn, it's not easy for all of us, but if you want to take it to the next level, start looking at specific farms and specific companies, family owned, take it to the highest integrity and order from there. So I get a lot of my meats from certain farms. If I ever get any seafood, I get it from certain places, wild caught, line caught. And if I'm ribeye, steaks, chicken, if I'm having fish, and I look at it too, like I do tend to eat a little bit more red meat because I think it is the cleanest source versus a lot of seafood problems. And chicken, if you guys know about chicken, it's called the dirty bird for a reason. There's also another reason why we don't eat medium rare chicken. Okay. So there's problems around meat and plants everywhere. And unfortunately, we just got to become the CEO of our health. So the rules for me is I'm keeping my sugar intake low. If I'm having any sugar, I'm going to have a little bit of fruit, but I try to have low sugar fruit. So I'm going to have maybe some raspberries, strawberries, maybe a little greenish banana to get more resistant starch and less sugar. I'm going to have a lot of times, I love eggs. I eat a lot of eggs, and I tend to only cook in ghee butter with Himalayan salt. That's my favorite thing to cook in. Sometimes tallow. I really try. I'm even more and more, the more I learn about it, the more I'm just staying away from all seed oils, even like olive oil and avocado oil. First of all, most avocado oil isn't even avocado oil. You really have to check, make sure it's hexane free, it's actual avocado oil, and it's an omega-9. So it's really not that valuable for you. I might use a little bit, like with olive oil, I tend to have it raw. I cooked in olive oil for years, but nowadays I tend to cook in a little tallow, duck fat, ghee butter. I'm cooking. And then even my steaks, I cook with almost no oil. I can get that done quite easily. That, just some salt, steak, I'm good to go. It's juicy enough. You cook it right, it's perfect. And so for me, about a big thing for me is how food is prepared, not just what you're eating. You can get a perfect, organic, whatever. And if you cook it improperly, you're causing worse digestion, more inflammation. You're not going to get bioavailable nutrients. You're going to destroy the nutrients if cooked improperly. So I think how we prepare food could be just as important as the quality of food, right? I can take a perfect steak, put a bunch of crap seasonings on it, flame it up and char it up, and it's not going to be very bioavailable, especially if you have IBD. That's why you're going to notice that you do a lot better with a soup with beef versus a barbecue beef when you have IBD, because it needs to be extremely bioavailable. It's the two things I want from food. I want to reduce inflammatory response, and I want to increase nutrient absorption. So yeah, that's where I'm looking to go. I tend to have high protein, moderate fat, and moderate to low carbohydrates. For me, that's more of how I feel good. I work with a lot of people who eat other ways. I've gone back and forth. I've been on diets where I'm 80% plant. I've been keto. I've been carnivore. I've done the fruitarian diet when I was really struggling and really sick. I worked with this guy named David Klein and ate 25 bananas a day. And I found value in all these crazy diets, even though now I just customize, right? And that gives me, again, spiritual groundedness, that I just customize. But I have an understanding of what food does in my body and how it works. I understand my macros. I understand my micros. I listen to what makes me feel good. I'm checking out my bowel movement, seeing how my body's responding to what I'm eating. Those are some ground rules. It has to be prepared properly. That's number one. That's why I really have a problem with restaurants, is it has to be prepared properly. I stay away from seed oils. Those things are deadly. And I'm looking for, get rid of glyphosate. And this improper food is almost everywhere. Like when I lived in New York, you can go to a 5-star restaurant and it's a $800 dinner, and you're realizing that it's crappy. It's inorganic meat. The fish is not wild caught. It's cooked in seed oil, and they're charging $110 for the steak. Come on. So I think a lot of cities really are behind on this. And if I have anything to say about it over the next 20, 30 years, maybe you'll help me out, Shawn. Let's rebuild this restaurant chain stuff, man. This is crazy. We need places to eat that are clean and good.
Yeah, exactly. I really go out to eat because I'm paying 6 times what I would at home, and the food at home is better. Dane, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We got to go. Share with us social media handles, maybe any websites or anything you want to share so people can find out more. This has been a lot of helpful information. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hope this is helpful for everyone. I'm here to take a stand for if you need help with IBD, we're here. We have the S.H.I.E.L.D program, supplements, herbs, imagination, exercise, lifestyle, and diet, the 6 pillars of health. We customize a plan for you. You get a private coach, one-on-one, for 3 months included. You're a lifetime member. We do everything IBD. We specialize in IBD. Our whole team and your coaches have IBD. So we live it, we breathe it. We feel integrity and trust are most important. We're on a mission to create high impact and get freedom, get our lives back, because I know what it's like to be chronically sick and stuck in that cage. So Shawn, I'll give you a link, but you can go to Crohn'sColitisLifestyle.com, check out the S.H.I.E.L.D program. Instagram is Crohn's Colitis _lifestyle, or me, Dane Johnson 1, youtube.com/Crohn's Colitis Lifestyle. You can check us out. And if you do check us out, just let us know you came from Shawn so we know where you came from, and we can help you customize what you need. And God bless. And if you need someone there, I hope I can take a stand for you, and healing is possible.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Shawn.